Bruchim Aboim, B'Shem Egan Shirtai. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Zev Smith, the Sugi of Petur Ba'olav Imoy B'Shoyel L'Shoymer. I would like to have the Tzchus sponsoring a shir. Call Egan Shirtai 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com.
One of my first encounters with Allah L'Mais as a young child, I used to play punch ball, and I hope it's not gaiva, but I was pretty good at it. And I used to sometimes punch the ball over the gate, and I got lost. So I took someone's ball, and I made it inaccessible. I lost it. So I remember thinking at the time that maybe that's the tour of ball of imay lo yishalem, because the owner of the ball was playing with me, and the Torah Kedoshah says in ball of imay lo yishalem. Is that a correct psak? Consider another Maisa Shahaya. Someone was called to be an aide to sign a ksubor, or a tanoim by the Kabbalah's Panim. So he was going up to sign. He asked the person, can I borrow your pen? And he took the pen, he signed it, he left it on the table by mistake. And after the chuppah, he realized that Pasha didn't return the pen. He took someone's pen, didn't return it. So he went back to Kabbalah's Panim room, and the pen was gone. And he felt terrible. He took someone's pen, he doesn't know whose pen it was, and he can't return it. He doesn't know who it was, and it's gone. Are there any eights of such a person? B'di'evet. Another true story, someone borrowed his Rosh Yeshiva's car. It was an interesting yeshiva, he borrowed the Rosh Yeshiva's car. And Bekitza was worse than that is, I guess he's a better learner than he's a driver, and he totaled the Rosh Yeshiva's car. Completely smashed it up. Is there any p'tur for him? And interesting, in this case, the Rosh Yeshiva found the p'tur. A fourth question is someone called the car service. He needed a car, and he was getting out. Instead of going out from the side next to the sidewalk, he opened the car into oncoming traffic, and the door was torn off. Is there any p'tur in that case? Another case where someone gave in an item to be repaired, and it was stolen from the repair shop. So Bekitza, if you notice, we have cases of a shomer, of a shoyel, someone borrowed it, of a soicha, someone that rented something. And believe it or not, all these shaylas plus many more lead us to one sugya, and that's the sugya of ba'olav imay lo yishalem. As we know, we're familiar, it's a pasuk in the Torah, it's the beloved perik, hashoyel in Bava Mitzia. There's a special p'tur of ba'olav imay lo yishalem, which of course we have to know what that p'tur is, then we can apply it la'halacha l'maisa. The pasuk says in Parshas Mishpatim, "V'chayishal ish mi'imrei eyu v'nishbar oimeis." If someone borrows something and anything happened, as we'll soon see, the Gemara says, even if it's an oinus, if you borrow an item and it gets ruined, lost, or damaged, ba'olav ein imay shalem yishalem. So this is the concept. If you borrow an item, and as the Gemara explains, you don't pay money, you don't rent it like a soicha, but it's kol hano'as shaloi, you're getting free use of the item, you have to be responsible. And since it's kol hano'as shaloi, zogt the Gemara in Bava Metzia, daf tzadik daled amid beis, shoyel is chayev ala kol. A shoyel is chayev on everything, even on oinsim. Why is it his fault? It's not his fault. But if you're getting free hana, you have to be fully responsible. In other words, a shem b'chinem has certain peturim. A soich is like a shem b'sachir. But when it comes to a shoyel, you borrowed it, keep the story, keep the tears, you pay for the item if it can't be returned. The next pasuk, in ba'olav imay lo yishalem. The same case of a shoyel, whose kol hano'as shaloi has to pay for everything, in ba'olav imay lo yishalem. Now this is the p'tur in ba'olav imay. But it's even a bigger chiddush than that, because the Gemara in Bava Metzia daf tzadik hey amud aleph says even if he was paisheya, pshia b'bailim, but if ba'olav imay lo yishalem. And this is quoted in Choshen Mishpat Shin Mem Vav Sif Aleph. So here we see two tremendous chedushim. A shoyel is chayav on everything, we could understand, kol hano'as shaloi, but in ba'olav imay lo yishalem. Now, before you apply this lamaisa, let me ask you a simple question. Let's say you have a Shay Mechinam, or a Shay Mesacher, or a Soicher that rents an item, and it's Bolav Imai. Is there a Ptur of Bolav Imai by the other three, by the Shay Mechinam, Shay Mesacher, or Shayel? So L'chayra, we could say, you can open the door. We could say Kal V'chayma. Madach, a Shayel, who's Chayev on everything, has a Ptur Bolav Imai, who adin L'chayra, the other three. And that's true, but besides being a Kal V'chayma, it's also a Gemara, where the Gemara says that if there's a Ptur Bolav Imai by a Shayel, as also by a Shay Mechinam, Shay Mesacher, and a Soicher. Okay. And that's the Mechab at the end of Siman Shin Memvav. So now we expanded our horizon somewhat, that there's a Ptur Bolav Imai by all four Shaymim, Shay Mechinam, Shay Mesacher, Shayel, and a Soicher. There's an obvious question that we really have to explain here before we apply this Lamaisa. What is the logic of this? The Chazal, the Torah Kedosha says, a Shayel, because you have Hana, you have to pay no matter what. So now that the Bailam is being extra nice, and not only is he giving you his item, he's helping you in Bolav Imai, so now you want to be Potter? Where's the logic? That's Mamish. Mishalem Ra Tachas Toiva. He gave you an item, and he's helping also. Why do you think you're Potter? And that's the kasha the Chavas Yo'er in the end of Reish Chav Gimel asks. And so the Shvas Yainkiv and Aleph Yutes at the same kasha. What's the logic of Bolav Imai? Haker, the more Hana, the more you should be Chayiv. And Lamaisa, this question, I must tell you, a lot has been written about, but probably the most conclusive teretz is what Tosfos says. Tosfos in Bav Metzia, Daf Tzadik Vav, says it's not a logic, it's a Chiddush HaTorah and a Gzeres HaKosiv. But I want to just mention, to make it a little easier to understand, the Chinuch and Mitzvah Samach explains that if the Bolav is with you, he's also watching. So maybe it's his responsibility to watch. Now we'll soon say that doesn't really satisfy the problem. Because if Bolav Imai B'Shas She'ela, and he's not there B'Shas Hezek, he's still Potter. So the Chinuch has that svara, but doesn't really work entirely. The Sefordu on our pasuk says that if the Bailam is helping you also, so there must be a Kiruv Hadas, and he's not going to mechayiv you to pay, which is also questionable. I saw the Ralbag and the Torah Tamima on this pasuk both say a very long Shechab. A person could be either mishabed himself or mishtabed. Either you could be responsible or you're getting responsibility. The case of Bolav Imai is both. He's giving and he's taking. He's giving the item and he's taking responsibility. You can't be a mishabed and mishubed at the same time. Again, it's also questionable. The Rikanti says maybe if the Balabas was there, maybe it's his fault, Mazloi Garim. I can tell you there are reasons, but I think the real reason is like Tosfos says, it's a Gzeres HaKosiv, that even though a Shayel is Chayev on everything, but in Bolav Imai Lo Yishalem Geif Hashtei, Kach Ratzah Hashem. But Lamaisa, the Bolav Imai is not a pure, perfect heta that's complete. There's an incredible Arachayim HaKadosh on this very pasuk, and the Arachayim HaKadosh learns the pasuk al pi pnimius. He says, "V'chayishal ishmi emriyeyu" is going on the Rebbeinu Shleilim. The Rebbeinu Shleilim gave us a neshama. V'nishbar oimeis, we fell into averis, and then we stand in din, and you know what we say? Bolav Imai Lo Yishalem. Rebbeinu Shleilim, you provided, you were with me, you never left me. Gam ki elav v'geit hamavis, you're with me. So if I'm potter, so the Arachayim HaKadosh, you might be right. Bolav Imai is potter midinei adam, but it's still chayiv midinei shamayim. So this is quoted by the later poskim that apparently even though there's a p'tur Bolav Imai, but there's still chayiv lotzeis midei shamayim. But I want to point out something interesting. Someone asked me, how could that be? The pasuk says potter, and the Arachayim HaKadosh says chayiv. So you look at the lashon of the Arachayim, he says there are kama v'kama situations that are potter medinei adam, but there's chayiv midei shamayim. So it's not so unheard of. A Gram Mazak is also potter, but there's midei shamayim. But another point that would modify this Orach Chaim somewhat, Orach Chaim's lashon is mi yoima ki ha-paisheya be with someone else's nechasim, maybe it's Chaim Midin HaShamayim. Orach Chaim seems to infer that the Baal Avima is Chaim Midin HaShamayim if he's paisheya. Why is that? And let's say it wasn't paisheya. Let's say it's Gnei Aveda. There's no Midin HaShamayim? And I think the answer is correct. Because we find the Mashal Grama ben Zaken is Chai B'dei Shemayim. But the Rishonim say that's only if he has kavanah to be mazik. If it's not his fault, there's no Chai B'dei Shemayim. So it could be that Chaim holds the same way. Taka, if someone was a Baal Avimai and it was a Paisheya, he's Pata Midinei Adam, correct, as they state in the Gemara. But there's still Chai B'dei Shemayim. So let's chazar. We have this Chiddush HaTorah of Baal Avimai. It applies to all Shaimim, even a Shoyel, even a Paisheya. Now let's apply it Lamaisa, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I did. First of all, let's start with the obvious question. Someone had a situation of Baal of Imai. We'll soon see what that means exactly, but the owner was helping him b'shas she'elim. So he decided, so let me just take it easy. And he doesn't even watch the chayfetz. This person understood Baal of Imai is a p'tur in Shmira. Now that is a terrible mistake. The Torah says in Baal of Imai lo yishalim. It doesn't say in Baal of Imai there's no Chi of Shmira. And the Nesivas HaMishpat and Reish Sadik Alasif Katan Lamedalid says this regarding a very important halacha l'maisa. Let's say it was a case of Baal of Imai, so he's patur to pay. But the owner of the chayv says, but at least make a shvur that you don't have it. He says, I'm not a shayma, Baal of Imai. Zak the Nesib is nothing doing. Baal of Imai does not mean you didn't have responsibility. You became a shayma. But it definitely becomes a shayma. So let's be very clear that this concept of Baal of Imai is a p'tur in tashlumin, but you have to do your job, whether you're Shem Mechinam, Shem Mesachar, Seicher, or Shoyel. Try your hardest. If something happens, he's takapot. Consider the following question. Someone had an item, and it was Baal of Imai, and he's takapot. But it didn't get lost or stolen. He was mazikit. The mood lo'ilam, he's mazik. But he says, wait a minute, he takes out his Baal of Imai card, Baal of Imai. So that's wrong. Because Baal of Imai is a patur in Shmira. Even if it's a pshia, but Lamaisa it got stolen, so he's patur. But the Paiskim say, and the Mishnah Melech in Hilchashut and Perikei Halacha Bey says this clearly, if the person was mazik and was Baal of Imai, there's no heta. Mazik is bava kama. Baal of Imai is bava mitzia. And that's very important because someone might think, listen, Baal of Imai is potter even if it's a pshia. So if I'm mazik, why am I much worse? The answer is, you're much worse. You're potter from chiyuvei shmira even if it was a pshia. But there's no heta to be mazik. Now generally, mazik is not a very common scenario. But what is extremely common is, let's say a person was mazik ba'oinis. A very simple case. He had an item and he broke it, not with malicious intent. He was mazik it biyadayim, but it was an oinus, it was an accident. So the Lamdan will say, let's make a cheshvan. A Baal of Imai is potter even on paisheya. So isn't it potter on an oinus? But then again, there's one chilik. You were mazik it, you're adma mazik. Adamud la'olam. So this is an excellent question, as we'll soon see as negeya to car service and many of our shaylas. It's takabal of imai, but it's a mazik biyadayim ba'oinis. So the shita of Rav Rishonim, be'ikad the Rambam, and Rambam in Hilchos Ishus Perik Chav Halacha Tes is Baal of imai is a heta in shmira, tur in shmira. If you're mazik, even if it's oinis, adam muad la'olam. The Ravid is mekel. Now, the case of the Ravid is extremely important. Let me share it with you. The Ravid has a shayla, and this is an outdated shayla. Please don't apply it in your own lives. But in the olden days, a husband and wife had a different relationship. The husband had his nechasim, the wife had hers, and the Rambam and Ravid and Isha that I just mentioned discusses the wife is working innocently in the house, and she was dropped her husband's item, and the husband says, "Pay! You broke my item, you got to pay for it." Again, don't do this today. That's what the Rambam and Ravid discuss. So the Ravid says she's not chayiv to pay. You know why? Because Bolav Imay lo yishalim. And here he's got it very literally, Bolav Imay. The Rambam says no. The reason why she's patta is because if you're going to make a wife pay for everything she breaks, there will be no shalom bayis. So, Zakti Mishnah Melech, the Rambam holds there's no heter Bolav Imay, because mazik there's no Bolav Imay. You have to come on to a new svara of shalom bayis. But the Ravid does say it's patta als Bolav Imay. Zakti Mishnah Melech, because the Ravid holds that if it's a mazik ba'oinis, there is a ptur of Bolav Imay. Now, Lamaisa, as I told you, the Roy Vishainim, and I saw the Beis Meir and Even Ezer Siman Pei, the Pischei Tshuva, and early in Kuf Ayin Vav Yud Gimel, say that Roy Vishainim hold that there is no ptur of Bolav Imay by a mazik, but says the Beis Meir, if this story happened and the wife says, I'm not going to pay, in the case where Bolav Imay, I'm not going to pay because the Ravid holds on Potter. And as a person that was mazik ba'oin says I'm Potter based on the Ravid, you can't be Maitzi Mammon. So for all practical purposes, we'll have to say the following. If someone mazik someone's item b'mezid, he has to pay no matter what. If he was mazik ba'oinis, and we'll soon see this is very common, he dropped an item or he was in a car and he caused the car damage. If he was mazik ba'oinis, he is not, Bezdin cannot be mechayim to pay because they kimli like the Ravid, that by mazik ba'oinis, there is a ptur of Bolav Imay. Now let's talk about a simple case. A child, and I say a child, I mean over bar or bas mitzvah, is being watched by a babysitter. Now why do I say an older child? Because a child under bar mitzvah is no chiyuv shmira. But a child over bar mitzvah is being watched by a babysitter, and the child asked the babysitter, "Oh, could I borrow your MP3? I want to listen to some music." So the babysitter says, "Sure," but Shuas Chain, and gave the child the MP3 player to play with. Okay. Lamaisa, the child lost that item. The child is a regular child that lost the item, Geneva Aveda. The child has to pay, and the child's over bar mitzvah, so there's a chiyuv shmira. However, this might be a legitimate Bolav Imay lo yishalim. Why? Pashut. The owner of the MP3 is watching the child. The Bailov is working for the child. So here you have a simple case that maybe it happens and we don't even realize that's a simple Bolav Imay. My only reservation, which I looked at, I could maybe ligati lemasasi al tamin, but is maybe in this case the Lamaisa, the babysitter, is not meshubah to this child, is meshubah to the parent. Now, the parent pays the babysitter to watch the child, but technically, the Bolav Imay is true, but it's not that's only regarding the one that's meshubah to. True, the child borrowed it from the babysitter, but the babysitter is being hired by whom? By the parent. So maybe there wouldn't be a heter Bolav Imay. Or you might say logically the parent is paying the babysitter to watch the baby, the child, whatever. So that's a little bit tzarachian to me, but this is the right situation of Bolav Imay. The same shaila comes up all the time. A parent hires a tutor to learn with their son, who's over bar mitzvah. And the son borrows something from the tutor, from a counselor in camp. All these cases are legitimate Bolav Imay. My only question is that the real relationship is the parent is hiring the tutor or babysitter. Maybe that's not Bolav Imay for that technicality. Ma'isa Shahaya, true story. Someone borrowed an expensive item from a neighbor and it got lost. And it was big money. So he decided to say, I am Potal's Bolav Imay. I, the owner of the item, does not work for you. So listen to a chap. So the owner of the item is an Atzola member. He's on call for Klal Yisrael, including me. So it's not joking, I'm not joking, a true story. And he's meshubit to me. Now, Lamaisa, it's not as outlandish as it seems. because there is a little bit truth to it. Very little, but a little bit truth to it. Because we understand Baal of Imay means that the Bailam is working for me when the item got lost. That's not necessarily true. The Gemara in Bava Metzia, and it's quoted in our Simon Shin Membav Sif Yud Beis, that anybody who's hired by the city, a Seifer, a Malamid, a gardener, a Mekizdam, any person that's hired by the city to be on duty, to be on call, to help a person when they need, that's Baal of Imay. A city doctor, city Mekizdam, is Baal of Imay to the whole city. Why? Because he has to be available and on duty for every single person. And then the Shulchan Aruch spells out, even though b'shas that the item was damaged or lost, he's not working for that person, but since he's on duty, he's on call, he has to go when they call, that's considered Baal of Imay. And we'll soon see the real definition of Baal of Imay does not mean that he's working at that moment. It means he's meshubit. He's responsible. So this fellow, I guess the Eitzara of saving money convinced him to say that the Atzal members are on call for me. And he's right. Atzal members are wonderful people. They're on call for Klal Yisrael 24/7. But you're missing the key word. He's not meshubah to you. The case of the Gemara, the Shulchan Aruch, is that everybody pays money to hire a community Mekizdam or gardener. So he's responsible for me because of a relationship that I paid him. But Atzal members are wonderful volunteers. You are meshubah to them, but then I'm meshubah to us. So let's clarify that. That's misapplying the word meshubah, and that's really not true. But why I mentioned it is because we do see an important concept. Baal of Imay is not necessarily working actively. It means he's meshubah at the time, and that shibud creates Baal of Imay. And we'll soon see other examples as well. Another question, let's say I borrow an item from someone, and the balabas volunteers to help me. I didn't ask him to help me. On his own, he volunteered to help me. Is that also Baal of Imay? Or maybe Baal of Imay is only if I ask him to help me. So the truth is, we'll say Zil Basa Taima. What's the chiluk? If he volunteered, if I asked him, if he is helping me, if it's Baal of Imay. And indeed, this is a Beferish Gemara. In Bava Metzia Daf Tzadik Zayin, Maraz Mama is a story where someone volunteered to help, and the Gemara says that's considered Baal of Imay. And that's the Mechab and Shin Mem Vav Dalid, that Lamaisa, on even if the Bailam on his own volunteered to help, but since he's helping at the time, that's Baal of Imay. But what's interesting, the Gemara has a but. True, Baal of Imay is even if he volunteers to help. But that's only if he's helping now for your benefit. Let's say he's helping for his benefit. For example, this is the case in the Gemara. Someone borrows your animal, okay? And you help him load the animal. A legitimate Baal of Imay, even though he volunteered. But let's say he's loading the animal because he doesn't trust you. Because you might overload the animal and the animal will die. He doesn't want the animal to die. So he helps load the animal for his benefit to protect his mamanis. That's not Baal of Imay. L'toiva soy is not Baal of Imay. L'toiva scha, he's giving you, lending you an item, and he's helping you, that's Baal of Imay. So we see in this Mechab and Sif Dalit of our Simon two halachas. Number one, Baal of Imay is even volunteering, as long as he's working for you. And number two, if it's L'toiva soy, it's not Baal of Imay. Now, I should mention the case about Solomon that I said is no Baal of Imay. Even there is a volunteer, but he's not working for you. That's why there wasn't a P'tura Baal of Imay. If theoretically, if a Torah member is working for someone, b'shas the item got lost, if it worked at punkt like that, and a chanami, but that's not the typical case. Listen to an eitzah the Gemara gives. It's a very interesting eitzah. Morris, let's say you're borrowing an item, and you're afraid that you might have to pay. So Zok Timar and Bav Metzia Daf Tzadik Zayin have a good eitzah for you. As the balabas is handing you the item, ask him for a drink. So now he's giving you the item and giving you a drink. So now it's Baal of Imay lo yishalem. Now that's a Gemara that's gepaskin in Shulchan Aruch. We'll soon see. But it's also a tremendous insight. Because Baal of Imoy does not mean he's working for you for 20 years and be working hard. As long as B'shas She'ela, when he's giving you the item, he's helping you, even if it's a simple task. So the Mechab and Sif Aleph, even if it's just B'shas She'ela for a moment, it makes no chilik. If B'shas She'ela, he is helping you, even a menial task like giving you a cup of water, you're patur. So that really clarifies the sugya. It's not work. It doesn't make a difference if when it got ruined, he's not there. The ik is b'shas she'ela. Is he meshubed? Is he working for you? Grad, I should mention, the Shulchan Aruch adds, which is also Mustavra. Let's say he started helping you before you borrowed the item, but he's still helping you. He's still meshubed. That's also good. The ikka is not when the item got damaged or lost. The ik is when you b'shas she'ela, when you borrowed the item. Now, I should mention, the Gemara is giving you an eitzah. Now, I forgot where I saw it, but I once saw this. This is a kasha on the Ohr Chaim HaKadosh. Because if there's a chiyuv l'atz b'dei shamayim, how could the Gemara give you such a broad eitzah, but it's not even ethically correct? So maybe Taka the Gemara is like the pasuk. We're telling you halachas, but you have to know the shamayim. But this is a shtickle ha'ara on the Ohr Chaim HaKadosh psak. But let's move on. So now the shayel seems to be very protected. And what about the mashal? Why don't we find an eitzah for him? So the Gemara continues. So the Gemara, mashal, he's a cunning fellow, but you got to be also cunning. I have a good idea for you, Zok the Gemara. The mashal is giving a chayfet. He's very nice. The shayel says, can I have a cup of water? So the Gemara, mashal, be a step ahead. Say, listen, first things first. Ein marv and simcha b'simcha. I don't do two mitzvahs in one time. Let me give you the chayfetz. Okay, finished. Now I'll give you a cup of water b'tzuas chayin. Why is that a good eitzah? Pashit. What he did was he separated the she'ela and the ball of imay. As long as the ball of imay is after the she'ela, there's no ptur whatsoever. And both of these are in Shulchan Aruch. If he first did the she'ela and then he did the service, that's not ball of imay and there's no ptur. So this is all in Shulchan Aruch, like I mentioned, and the Shulchan Aruch stresses loishne that imay malacha, not different malacha, as long as he's working b'shas the she'ela. So Rabbi said what we just did now is we really clarified what it means bal of imay. Let's chazer over because it's kedai. The ik is it has to be bal of imay b'shas she'ela. It doesn't have to be b'shas that the item got lost or damaged. Even a different malacha, even an insignificant malacha of giving a cup of water. Even if the balabas volunteers to do the work, and lav dafka actually working, if the balabas is mishubid, he's on call, on duty, that's enough. And even in the case of all other shaymim, there is definitely a ptur. The only time it's not balavimai is if he's doing it for his own benefit. What does Baal of Imai mean? So here we see one chiddush as Kedai to mention. The Mechab and Sivav says, let's say the Bailam is not there, but he sends a shliach to help you. So Zakti Mechab, according to one shita, which seems that we paskin, even though shluch shaladim kamoisei b'chalater kulai, in this context, it's not Baal of Imai. The Torah says Baalav, not shliach. So that's important. We'll soon use that. The Chashochan and Sif Tezayin has an Egen Chiddush. He says, that's true. If the Bailam sends his son or children, it's not Baal of Imay. But if his wife, that would be Baal of Imay. There's a concept of Ishtay Kegufay that's considered like Baalav. So that's the exception. But B'derech Klal, Baal of Imay is very literal. Okay. Now let's talk Tachlis, our original Shilas. My case that I began with, I punched the ball, I made it, got it lost. I was a shayl, I borrowed the ball, so I'm chayiv to pay. Geneva Aveda, Persha Gemara. But my taina is, ball of imay, the owner's playing with me. So that is wrong. Ball of imay does not mean the ball is with me. I mean, if you want to say that, you might as well say, if the mother's there, it's also good, ball of imay. That's as foolish as my pshat. Ball of imay does not mean with me. Bol of imay means meshubit. So if the owner of the ball is playing ball with us, that's wonderful, but he's not meshubit to me. And that's klar. Bol of imay is shaykh by a babysitter, a tutor, someone that's working. If he's working, b'shash she'ela. The person that I borrowed the ball from is not working for me. He's playing with me. He's enjoying it. That's wonderful. And that would not be bol of imay. Now, the only thing is like the chinuch's explanation of why bol of imay is pata, because the bailam is there, and therefore I'm relying on him, or if mazlei garim, then you could say maybe this works. But I told you the main reason is toisvis. There's a kasav. You can't change the halacha because of one of the reasons. And lemaisa, it's klar, it has to be a shibud, not just that he's physically there b'shas mais. Question. The same type of relationship, husband and wife, but this case, the husband broke the wife's item. And the wife is courageous enough to say, husband, pay up. It's my nichse malug. So this is a beferish Gemara, Tzadik Vav Med Beis, and Machab and Sif Tezayin. That is a legitimate bol of imay. Why? It's pashut. Because since the wife is constantly meshubah to the husband at all times, so it's at least that on-duty type of shibud, and the husband could say, I'm not paying, because bol of imay, here in case bol of means the wife, but the owner of the item, the wife, is meshubah to me, and therefore I'm potter. So it's interesting, a little misleading, but bol of imay means the wife, the owner of the item, is with me, she's meshubah, and I'm potter. This is a mechaba. I must mention, please don't quote me in the house, but the Sma points out that even if she's not working at the time, she's reading a newspaper. But since she's meshubah at all times, that's like the case of shibud that we said. On duty is enough. But another thing I will tell you, but please don't quote me. Fakert, as I told you earlier, is not so pashut. The Rambam and most Rishonim say that there's no p'tur bol of imay when the husband damages a wife's item. Why not? I'm sorry, when the wife damages a husband's item, I'm sorry. Because there's no shibud, the husband to the wife. It's only the wife's shibud to the husband. Now, that's something that doesn't sit well with a lot of people, but that's what the Bir Agra says, and Sif Kot and Yud Zayin, and that's most shittas. It doesn't go both ways. The Ikashi, not in this respect. That's what they say. The Bir Agra says that's the shita of the Shara Poiskim. Some takas say, like Rabbi Bol just mentioned, there's a chiyuv to be mefanis his wife. But the Mechaba only says the case regarding the husband who damaged his wife's item. And Lamaisa, if you have, the Raiva does say bol of imay that way. So if it happens and some say kimli, you can say pata. But this is something that is based on the careful reading of the Mechaba. It seems to go one way. Question. A typical case of bol of imay is when a person borrowed his friend's computer. Okay? And he asked his friend, either he asked his friend or a friend volunteered, let me show you how to use it. And he showed him. And then Lamaisa, he used it and it got stolen. So the Chayra, the Shayel will say, I'm sorry, I'm really chayav, but bol of imay, you helped me b'shas m'she'ela. So this is a legitimate bol of imay, but with one catch. If the person the owner was showing him how to use the item for his own tachlis to protect his computer, that would be a bol of imay l'tzarchai. I didn't see this exact case, but I did see the Pischei Choshen in Perek Vav Or Yudalid. He says that let's say the owner showed the shoyel how to start the item, how to start it off, because he's afraid that he's going to start it off wrongly and break it. That's considered bol of imay l'tzarchai, and is no p'tur. So you have to be careful. This is extremely common. I'll tell you an example. The children, they rent a canoe, a mountain bike, they rent things, and the owner gives them instructions how to use it. So if they lose it, if they damage it, they'll say, hey, it's not my bol of imay. If the owner was showing you how to use it, litzar chai, then there's no p'tur of Baal Avima. That's a Pharisee Gemara. So the truth is, as when you learn halacha, you see this. If you learn properly and you focus on every bit of information, everything is there. You have to know when to apply it to what. Consider the next question. Okay, it's again to a few questions, and I can't say I'm certain about it, but I hope I have the right psak. Someone went to a hotel, paid good money for a Shabbos, and Lamaisa, he broke something of the hotel. It was a oinus, a real oinus. He was a mazik ba'oinus. So the chayra, mazik chayiv, adamud la'olam. So he came up with a svara, it's taka mazik ba'oinus, but this is ba'al of imay. Because the hotel owner is responsible at all times to be there on call. If I need something, if I want something, I call the desk and then they're there for me. So he assumed that, which is right, that a person goes to a hotel, he's paying rent, he's a soicha, and by a soicha we learned there's a p'tur ba'al of imay. So this might be correct, because Lamaisa, according to the contract, they're responsible to be there if you need something, you know. Now I'll say at that moment that I damaged the item, the owner was in Florida, let's make a chilik. As long as he's meshubed, that's Baal Avimai. The only question I had with this, and I spoke to a guy and he said that makes sense, but I was thinking afterwards, if so, every rental, every tenant that damaged should be potter because the Baal Abbas is responsible for him. But there's not, it's the chilik is pashit. A rental, basically you're on your own. If you have a real problem, you come to me. But a hotel, the agreement is that they have to be available for any problem, any need. You know, you're paying good money for a weekend or an overnight. So it seems that a hotel person that paying all that money, there is a responsibility that continues as long as he's there. So that l'chayr would be a case of Baal of Imay lo Yishalim. Oh, very good. I was about to say that. And this Dayan pointed out to me, but since typically they write in the contract you're responsible for whatever you're responsible for, excellent, that overrides the original P'tur Baal of Imay, because that says in the Gemara, you're allowed to make a Tanai and Taki Yapata. Now with this question, you could see this clearly. A guest goes to a chasana and dropped the night, he dropped the glass. So he might say, this is Baal of Imay, because the caterer is right there. And the caterer is, there to help me. So that, of course, is, stretching it. Even though the caterer prides himself that you're like his personal guest, but he has no responsibility to you guests. If anything, to the Baal Simcha, but basically, he's not responsible to you. He likes to give you that feeling, but that's not the case. What you have to do is go over to the owner or manager and say you broke something, and if he's Meichel, fine. Don't go to the Spanish waiter that says, are you Meichel? And he shakes his head very, reverently. He doesn't know what you're talking about. You have to go to the Bailam or a manager, someone that's in charge. More pashit, a person is shopping, picked up an item and dropped it by mistake. And he says, Baal of Imay, the storekeeper's right there, and he's a very accommodating person. Again, that's not, the Bailam is there, but he has no responsibility to any of his guests. So the case of the storekeeper and a caterer is definitely Baal of Imay physically, but it's not responsible. I would think a tenant in a hotel might be more of a Baal of Imay lo Yishalim. A case that has interesting applications, people swapped apartments. Marshall, I live in Lakewood and someone lives in Brooklyn and we have a simcha and the other one's neighbor, let's swap apartments. Or typically people swap bicycles or whatever, you swap things. So you have mine, I have yours. So, and let's say one of them got lost or damaged. So the Mechab in Shin Hey Si Vav says, Shmar li ve'esh malach. If we swap things, either Shmira, and the Ramah says, Hu adin She'ila, even though it's a real She'ila or Shmira, there is a P'tur Baal of Imay. Because simultaneously, I took yours, you took mine. So you're watching my item, I'm watching your item. So as the Mechab says, if Taka, it was a swap simultaneously, mine and yours at the same time, that would be a built-in case of Baal of Imay lo Yishalim. More often than not, it doesn't happen the same second. I get to your apartment before you get to my apartment, whatever the case might be. But the Mechab himself says, Shmor li hayoim and Eshim l'chol ha'machar, it's not Baal of Imay. It has to be the same time when there's a noticeable Shmor li ve'esh v'lach simultaneously, and that would be Baal of Imay. Question. Someone borrowed an item from a gemach, and they say, we love help giving chesed, but we have to be protected. You must give a mashkin. So he puts down a valuable item. That, again, a gemach is a she'ilah, and the she'ilah is chayav on everything. But if he put down the mashkin b'shas ma'isa, it's very logical to say that he would be pata als shmarli ve'eshmalach. They gave him the item, and he gave his item. And that l'chayr is true. The Tumim and Ayin Beis Yud Ches, the Nesivos, the end of our Simon Shin Hey, quotes this. If he gave the mashkin b'shas ma'isa, and it's like a shmarli ve'eshmalach, it would taka be a bowl of imay, lo yishalem. But don't worry, the mashkin, the bala gemach could take a mashkin. What he does is, again, the same approach. First things first, eimar v'simcha b'simcha. Let me first give you the item. Good. Then you give me your mashkin. Once he's separated, it's not bowl of imay b'shas she'elim. Now someone asked me a good question, and let's say it was b'shas ma'isa, but isn't the bala gemach taking the mashkin l'toy v'asoy to protect himself? The answer is yes, but if he wants to do l'toy v'asoy, he won't give you the thing, he won't lend you the item. The whole lending is l'toy v'ascha. This is just to protect the original chesed is doing for you, but it's more l'toy v'ascha to be able to make that she'ilah. So the whole thing is a chesed for you, including the taking of the mashkin. Now, ma'isa shahaya, a true story. Someone needed something to be repaired. He went to the repair shop, and the repair shop says, I'm overbooked. I can't take any new jobs. My work has left me. So the person who needed repair says, I'll help you. I know this work. I'm not good enough, but I can help you. And they worked together. But they didn't finish. That night, someone broke into the repair shop and stole the item. So you have to realize that a repairman in his shop, he's a shayma. He's chayim gnei v'aveda. But the repairman said, Bol of imay, we worked the whole day. Zok the tashbetz in chelik daled, tur bei simen chav daled, it's like the second part of the sefer. He says, you're right, but this Bol of imay was the toivasai. He's helping you for his good, not to save you money. And therefore, every shaila is in our Heilige Shulchan Aruch if we just learn properly. Consider the following question, a very intriguing question. Two people owned a horse, or a car today is just as good. Okay? Shutvis in a car. It was a shutvis because they had a business together. It was shutvis for shutvis-related work. One day, one of the shutvis said, I have to go someplace for personal needs. Would you give me your part of the car? He said, but she was chayin, surely. And he's going, and Geneva Veda. So he's chayiv to pay. He borrowed his friend's car, at least buy half of it. So he says, Baal of Imai. Who's the Baal of? Believe it or not, me. I own half the car. So he wants to say, Baal of Imai. Very good. But the Baal of Imai in this context is a real Tayvasai. And this is Maram Rutenberg, in the Tshuva Tfus Prague, Tafsaf Kuv Beis. Someone asked him the Shaila, and he says, well, there's no Baal of Imai, and there's no Meis Machas Balacha, Avad Yechayev. He doesn't even speak out why there's no Baal of Imai, because this is a bona fide Baal of Imai L'Tayvasai. Question. A person was a real Baal of Imai, Bezin says Yapata, but the Shaima says, you know what, I don't rely on kulas, and he paid for the item. As soon as he finished paying, police come, here we found the ganef, here's the ganef, and here's the item. Now the ganef has to pay kefil. Who does the kefil go to? The owner? Or maybe this Shaima that stepped in to pay for it, he gets the kefil. Zokta B'Kiveig, in the end of Lamed Gimel, Lamed Beis, and Bava Metzia, since he was really part to pay the kefil, so he wasn't kind of the chayfetz, you'll give him back his money, and the kefil goes to the original bailam. Someone gave in a computer to fix, but he can't manage his computer, so either he rented or borrowed a computer from the repairman. In either case, Lamaisa, he lost that computer. Is there a p'tur of bola? Is there a chayav to pay? Pashtus is a shoyel. But here we have a case of bola v'imoy. At the same time that he borrowed the item, the Baal Boss is working for him. And that indeed would be a legitimate Baal of Imai lo yishalem. Regarding our car service question that we began with, again, just to remind you the story, a person hired a car service to take him someplace. Instead of opening the door to get out by the side of the sidewalk, he opened the door onto ongoing traffic. The door was smashed off. He was a mazik ba'oinus. Okay, not amazing, but he's a mazik ba'oinus. So he has to pay. It's a big cost. So he comes up with a lumdus, listen to a lumdus, and he says, Lamaisa Balavima lo yishalim. Right? I'm using the car. I rented the car, and the owner of the car is driving for me. Balavima lo yishalim. He's right. The car belongs to the driver, and the driver is indebted, working for him the whole entire time. Now, if it's not the driver's car, if he's working for a bus company, like in a bus situation, or a real car service, okay. But there's a private car service, he's driving his own car, and Bolavima. It's a mazik, but it's a mazik ba'inus. But you think about it, there's a big mistake in that reasoning. We say, I called the car, I hired a car, but you did not borrow the car. You hired the driver to drive you someplace. You didn't borrow the car. You're not a shell on the car. Therefore, there's no p'tur of she'ela. So what are you? A regular mazik. Iron einis, adamud la'olam. What can I do for you? And this I saw, so Yanke Fish and Evan Yisrael Chelik Ches Kuf Zayin, he says, imagine if the passenger finds an Aveda in the car while he's driving. Could he say, it's my chutzes kainit? He says, you're not borrowing the car, it's not your car, it's the driver's car, you hired the car, the driver, that's true. And I want to add, let's say you're about to say Tefillas HaDerech, so you want to be from, you say, you borrow the driver's car to say Tefillas HaDerech. As you're putting it on your head, it flies out the window. Then you potter. Why? Because bowl of the hat is imay. But you're not potter on the car. And that l'chayr is pashut. Also, by a bus driver that doesn't own the bus and not working for you, it's more pashut. But even by a regular driver, there's no shayla that's not bowl of imay regarding the car. Now, there's a lot of chuvas in the earlier paiskim when someone hired a balagola with a wagon to transport his goods. Now there you could say you're hiring the wagon also. Oh, that could be. There's also fakerta shayla, if the item got damaged and the balagola says, I'm not going to pay for the damage of the item because Balav Imai, the owner of the item, was there. There it goes both ways, because there taka, you're hiring a balagola with the agola. But in a typical car service, there's no sheila on the car per se, and Avada, he's chayiv on the mazik ba'inus. Now, you have to just know, if when someone opens the door and the car comes, is that considered a mazik? All it is a grama, but it's not true. If you open the door into ongoing car, it's like putting an item in front of an eish that was mama's like a mazik, and he would have to pay. This leads to another major question I'd love to hear from the Olam, but the question that I began with. It happened to be a true story, someone that borrowed his Rosh Hashiva's car, and he totaled the car. The whole car was ruined. But any item that a Talmud borrows from a Rebbe, and he lost it, a typical case of she'ila, that's the chayav to pay. But in the case that I told you, the Rebbe's car the Rosh Hashiva's car was totaled, and the Rosh Hashiva was ma'oira, then maybe the Talmud is potter. Why? Because I'm the Rosh Hashiva, he's a Talmud, I'm a Shubba to teach him, he borrowed it during yeshiva hours, and maybe it's a bowl of imay. But the truth is, it just sounds a little more convincing than it does. Because the Mechab in Sif Yud Beis and Yud Gimel speaks about a Rebbe-Talmud relationship, and he says that if the Rebbe has to learn what the Talmud wants, then the Rebbe is Meshubba to the Talmud, and it's bowl of imay. So you have Mechab and Sif Yud Beis and Yud Gimel, that in a typical Rebbe-Talmud relationship is Baal of Imai. More so, says the Chavas Yor in Hilchas Pesach, that's where Sugi is also, Tav Chav Tes in the beginning, even if the Rebbe could decide what to learn. But if the Talmud is paying the Rebbe to learn, so the Rebbe is a poyel, is Bol of Imai. So that's why this Shaila made the headline, so to speak, in the Yeshiva Welt upon him, because the Chayr is a regular Bol of Imai. The Rebbe is, Rashiva is Meshubah to the Talmud. The only question that I have, and I think it's an emes point, is in all the cases of Bol of Imai, that's a legitimate Bol of Imai because, like Mechaba's case, I hire a private Rebbe, he's Meshubah to me. In this case, who is the Rebbe, the Rashiva, really Meshubah to? The one that's paying him. Who's paying him? The Yeshiva, the Manayal, the Rosh Yeshiva, whatever it is. A Rebbe is Meshubah to work with Talmidim, but who is the Bol of Imai? Who's he Meshubah to? The Manayal, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Manayal, the house of the Yeshiva. So it's different in the cases, all the cases till now, the work is Meshubah to the person that took the item. Here is Meshubah to the Yeshiva. I'll give you a mashal, the Stabas Oizim. Imagine I hire a builder to build my home. Okay? The builder doesn't do all the jobs. He subcontracts, he gets an electrician and a plumber. Now let's say I, the homeowner, borrow an item from the electrician. And I put it down, I got stolen. I say, Bol of Imai la Yishalom, electrician, you're working for me. He says, I'm not working for you, I don't know who you are. I'm working for the builder. Right? So isn't that the same scenario in this case? In other words, the Rebbe-Talmud relationship in the Mechaba was a person hired, a private Rebbe, a tutor. They didn't have yeshivas in those days. Or even today, if someone wants a good chavrusa, balabasi, he takes a yeshiva man, you learn with me. So I tell you what we learned. You have to answer my question. You have to be on duty. That's a real Bol of Imai. But today, of course, the Rebbe has to teach the Talmud, has to answer his questions, but who is he Meshubah to? So then Halav tell him, learn with these and these Talmidim. But is there any relationship between the Rashiva and the Talmud as far as a Chiyuv of Bol of Imai? L'chayr not. Plus, we have the other question, the boy's not paying the Rebbe anything. If anything, the boy's parents. But even they are brokering the yeshiva to get a Rashiva for their son. So that would not be a typical Bol of Imai. But where this could be is, again, if someone hires a chavrusa, he doesn't want to call it a tutor, but he hires a chavrusa, learn with him, and then the same story happens. He borrows the chavrusa's Rebbe's car, and he totals it during the time that they're meshubed, and echanam he would be put. Another fascinating shayla that I began with. Someone took a pen to sign his name, and this is very important, on a ksuba or a tanayim, and he lost it. Is he chayiv or pater to pay? So the chayiv, what's the shayla? I mean, a pen is not worth $1 million, but din prutik in May. Who cares how much it's worth? So here we come to a Gemara. Tzadik Vav and Aleph. The Gemara says, if someone borrowed an item of hano less than a shava pruta, there is a tzad to say that it doesn't have a din she'ela, because less than a shava pruta, it doesn't have a chalois of she'ela. The Gemara has a suffix, Gemara by a suffix, but the Mechaber says in Sif Yud, Lamaisa, it's a suffix and you can't be Maitzi Mammon. In other words, you borrow an item worth $1,000, but only to use it for a less than a shava pruta. The she'ila is for use of less shava pruta is a suffix in the Gemara if you consider a she'il or not. And Lamaisa you can't mechayiv him to pay. So the chayra, this pen is a perfect example. I didn't borrow it to write a 14-page tickle tire that's a shava pruta of ink. I borrowed it to sign my name, but that's a shava pruta. Now, avad, you can't keep the pen because it's not your pen. You can't break the pen because that's the shava pruta. But since the she'ila was not chal, if that's the shava pruta, l'chayra, he doesn't have a din of a shayil. Now, if he still has the pen, of course you have to return it. You can't keep it. But since it's lost, why would he mechayiv him to pay only als shayil? He wasn't a shayil. And I saw this come out the same case. Rabbi Pesach Frank had a shayla. Someone borrowed a pen to sign his name. And after he signed his name, this is in his times, there were Jordanian artillery, and there was the alarm rang, and they all ran for their lives. They left the pen there, and it got lost. So Pesach stellt zu this Gemara, it's a she'ila unless than a shava pruta, no chiyuv to pay. Now again, if you have the pen, you have to return it. That's a shava pruta. But on the she'ila of less than shava pruta, it doesn't have a chalais shem she'ila. A more common example, you borrowed someone's glass just to drink from it, and you dropped it. Could be taka the same patur. If the she'ila doesn't have a pruta, there's no chi of she'ila. Now, I cleared a shaila when someone borrows a cell phone from his friend for a local call. He says, by the way, do you have to pay for this? He says, no, unlimited time. He used the phone and left it on the table, and it got stolen. Does he have to pay for the phone? The phone's worth a lot of money. So he's alarmed. He says, I only used it to make a phone call, and you said it cost you nothing. So she'ila and pachim shavapruta. You're saying good, right? But I have a stickle of a suffix about that, because the she'ila was to make a phone call. How much is a phone call worth? I mean, many people have unlimited time, but a phone call is worth something. I believe it's a shavapruta. Rather, most phones have a deal that you pay for unlimited, but a phone call is worth more than signing one's name. So if you could determine that a phone call today has the shabis of a shavapruta, avada and avada, you would have to pay for it, even though he's not makbid on it. But once it was a she'ila, there's a chiyuv. Ma'aseh shahaya, someone rented an apartment. He gave a precondition: I'm only moving in. The only tzchal, I want to freshly paint it. Okay, so the balabas is fine. We'll paint it. He's painting it himself, and the tenant came one day and he said, "Oh, something is broken." He borrows an item from the balabas, and he finished using it. He put it down and he left, and the item was stolen. Balabas asked the tenant, "Where's my item?" So he said, "Oh yeah, I left it there." And he went back and it was gone. Balabas says, "Pay me for the item. It's she'ela, and it was stolen." So he says, no, it's she'ela b'baylim. I borrowed, and you're working for me. I saw this in the Sefer Rishmei She'ela. They asked the Pti Pesach Frank this she'ela. He had a beautiful chap, which is Pasha and Emes. He said, since the original deal was that the lease begins when it's freshly painted, and it wasn't yet freshly painted, so he's not a baylim, it's not she'ela b'baylim. And last but not least, a question that needs a lot of iyun. Someone called a driver to teach him how to drive. He's a student driver, and the other one was the Rebbe driver. The kid, I don't have to tell you the end of the story. He smashed the car, broke the car, whatever it is. Does he have to pay? So he's saying, this is a classic she'ila b'baylim. The Baal is sitting next to me. He's working for me. I paid him. True, but the question only is, in this case, first of all, did you borrow the car? If you just hire the service of the teacher, it's not a she'ela, the car is not yours. Also, sometimes it's a pshia on the teacher's fault. You have an extra set of brakes to use it for a reason. So this is something you have to think about, but let's just have up what we learned Bekitza. Bekitza, what we learned today is we have a beautiful Torah, as we see. A she'ela is always chayiv, even on an oinis, unless it's ball of imay. A ball of imay is even on a pshia. A mazik is not excluded, but a mazik ba'aynis is pata. Shoyel is pata balvima. Who and then the other three shaymim, what there might be has bearing, but the real is exeris hakosav. If someone is a peisheya, the Archaim says there's a chiyav lotzais b'dei shemayim. Even ball of imay, there's still a chiyav of shmira, just you don't have to pay for it. If it's a real mazik, there's no patur. As we said, a child borrows from a babysitter, a tutor, is taka. Would be ba'al of ima l'chayra. Lav dafka, working, ba'al of ima is accurately defined as shibudim. Hatzalah member is a volunteer who's not ba'al of ima. Even if the baal volunteers to work, unless it's taivasa, is considered ba'al of ima. There's an eitzah to ask for a cup of water, or the person will use the eitzah back and say, I'll give it to you afterwards. A husband that broke the wife's item is a ba'al of ima. Swapped apartments, bikes, or shmira, if it's simultaneously, it would be bol of imay. A gemach that takes a mashkin is bol of imay unless they do it first. Helped a repairman l'toivase, as we said, is taka is not bol of imay. B'shutvis is not bol of imay. A car service is not bol of imay because you didn't borrow the car. Certainly a bus driver. Rebbe Talmud, you have to be mishayah what the relationship is. A pen or a cup for less than a shavapruta would taka not be chayiv at all. I couldn't talk to you. Marcy, I know. Dat was mama. Dat was voor mama.
Shame making sure like to thank Rabbi Smith for the wonderful shir. B'chem Hashem ratu rotsa kadosh baruch Hu lezak es Yisrael zeik chibram tamid v'shnam na nechavas man tzidka yagel tevadi. Amen. Amen. Amen.